A very good morning to you on this 22nd day of April, 8 days to payday. And we've just come through a great weekend of meeting together and remembering Christ in his death and his resurrection. And what an awesome watershed event in history to continue to remember, because the warp and woof of our lives is built around that idea of order, disorder, and reorder, which of course is the humble self exalted. That's what it means, death and resurrection. We are in the book of Hebrews, and we're doing some low flying over these days, over 303 verses of the storyline as it unfolds in 13 chapters. The text is addressed to the first century readers who are Christian Hebrews. They have come out of Judaism, they've embraced Christ the King, but they are in the throes of deep struggle. They are being challenged, their faith is being shaken. Because across the 13 chapters, the writer is bent on showing his audience that God will constantly stir us to stick. Remember those two words, stirred to stick. Don't think of the Bond movies now, shaken, not stirred. Stirred to stick. Isn't it amazing how often instructions on a bottle would say, stir this well before you apply? Because the stirring thins it and causes it to stick as well. Well, the God of heaven has some amazing ways in how he gets us to stick with his agenda. But he doesn't get us to stick against our wills. He doesn't rape our will in order to achieve his purposes. Now, there are times, let me make a balancing comment here. There are times in the scriptures where God has ordained particular events that they will happen, irrespective of what man does. But that doesn't mean that we must use inductive reason and apply that to every and any instance in our lives that he is raping our desires and our wills to achieve. He's a great God. He's bigger than we could ever know. We exist inside of him. Acts 17:25 says. And we struggle at times with challenges in our lives. And these believers are in exactly the situation where their doubts are rising, their questions are intensifying, and makes me think back to Luke 15, the prodigal. While the emphasis is on God the Heavenly Father, waiting with eager anticipation for his son to return, there's also the aspect in the story where the prodigal leaves what he has as a son and as a result suffers. Because you only realize in absence what you have in presence. Can I repeat that? You only realize in absence what you have in presence. We live so predictively and so uncreatively that we don't think about what is happening in our lives from day to day, and contemplating God and meditating on his word so that we can get a deeper appreciation for what he is doing. Because you see, suffering and sonship go together. Suffering doesn't have value, suffering is a value. And when you add a value to a purpose or a purpose to your value, that's when you create meaning. Suffering and sonship for the purpose of stick-to-itiveness combine to give life deeper and more intense meaning. But you say, can't God do better and use joy and use pleasure? Well, pleasure is a lot more addictive than pain because pleasure gets us to lose the treasures very often. But pain is a way of rocking us back to reality. So the question in this paragraph, going from verse 4 to verse 8, is what meaning emerges in the midst of sufferings as sons? What meaning emerges in the midst of sufferings as the people of God? Because stirring to stick-to-itiveness, God uses suffering as a sign of sonship and also suffering as a substantiation of our sonship, as proof that we are what He has called us to be. And so, in view of the great host of spirit beings, the heavenly hosts that are witnesses about the readers, what does the author do? The author exhorts his audience to run with endurance. Run with endurance, renewing your commitment to finish the race. It's not about how well you start. It's all about how well you finish. And all can finish well. Can you listen to that? All can finish well. It's not for a segmented or fragmented elitist group on the margins for which this is a desire. It is for all those who name the name of the Lord. It's not for a special saints. We all will go through the ringer because that is part of how refinement happens and takes place. And so the writer starts out and says, in your struggle against sin, you have not yet resisted to the point of shedding your blood. In standing for God and living for Him, you have stopped short of death. You have not yet resisted unto blood, unto giving your life in your battle against sin. And it's interesting again, yes, sin is in the singular in verse 4. The sin that sticks so close to us comes out of verse 3. It's the sin of unbelief, the sin of giving up, the sin of defecting, of falling away. In your struggle against unbelief, you have not yet resisted to the point of shedding your blood. What does the writer do? The writer reminds the readers that they've not yet gotten to that point where they've given their lives because of their struggle against unbelief. Verse 5. And have you forgotten the exhortation that addresses you as sons? What's that exhortation? Well, here it is. And he quotes from the book of Proverbs so beautifully. My son, do not regard lightly the discipline of the Lord. That's that word for child training, from which we get the word pedagogue, paiduo, the discipline of the Lord. Nor be weary when reproved by Him. Why? There's an explanatory gar in the Greek text. For the Lord disciplines the one He loves and chastises every son whom He receives. You won't get out of this life as a believer, as one who's separated out, as one who's transforming without stripes to show, without marks on you. Interesting, as we get older, we get a lot of different marks on us, isn't it? Age marks being one of them. Oh, we complain, our skin's colors are changing. And we have all kinds of recipes to doctor that. For the Lord disciplines the ones he loves and chastises every son whom he receives. Well, we ought to understand that the chastening and the trials in our lives is not always due to sin or sins. It just isn't. Job is the most obvious case in point. Text says in Job 1 and 2, he was blameless, but he suffered like nobody's business. So James 1, verse number 1 to verse 4 says, My brethren, count it all joy when you fall into divers temptations, when you get into multicolored trials, trials of different shapes and sizes. Don't be shocked as if something strange is happening to you. Knowing this, James goes on, that the trying of your faith works patience, works long-temperedness. There's an impact in our lives that we learn how to wait, not to lose WEIGHT, but to gain WAIT. Start learning what patience looks like. And so these Jews of the diaspora in the book of James, likely Jewish believers who were scattered throughout the then known world, are encouraged to hang in there because God is doing something. You see, we need to understand that there is such a thing as the obedience of faith. Romans 1:5 and Romans 16, verse number 25, talks of the obedience which is faith. I take those as appositional descriptors. What is faith? What is obedience? It is faith, trusting God. And faith is not a work. Faith is continuity of contact, embodied continuity of contact with the one for whom we ultimately care, and he's God. And so discipline has a particular purpose in our lives. But not only that, we don't only suffer as sons, but suffering works something in our lives that gives us affordances of choice. How do we know that? The Lord disciplines those he loves. Verse 7, for it is for discipline that you have to endure because he loves you. Say, what a strange way of showing love. God is treating you as sons. For what son is there whom his father does not discipline? If you are left without discipline, in which all have participated, then you are illegitimate children and not sons. You're like kids born out of wedlock, loose cannons that they have no roots. They're not grounded, no stability. For the Lord loves those whom he chastens. And you see, this chastening shows that somebody out there loves us. Like with our kids, we don't only discipline them when they are naughty. At times we discipline them, not because it's tied to something wrong that they have done, but because there are some lessons they have to learn. Because love is like that. Love requires vulnerability and intimacy. And it's a scarce commodity today because we have such a misunderstanding of what it is. It's that which affords us choices. It's personal voluntary sacrifice that benefits others or on behalf of others. So we ought to take our trials as training. He's training us. He's disciplining us toward a particular goal. A goal is the goal of godliness. Godlike, becoming more and more like Christ. And that takes great faith on our part. A faith, a continuity of contact that affords us an understanding of why he's doing it, what he's doing, and why he's doing it. See, the traditional sense of the certainty of faith, as someone has said, has been a key to the survival of the saints. It has been their armor plating against doubt. And then he says it so beautifully, it's their steel, STWEL. Their steel will in adversity or persecution. It's their trump card in evangelism, and it's their, listen to this, their Archimedean lever with which to move the world. Because somehow the world gets stunned to silence when they watch the people of God endure great times of challenge, great times of discipline, great times of reproof. You see, it's not how you respond when things go well. It impresses people. What touches them is how you respond in the midst of the fire of life. When things go out of whack, when the challenges are crazy. The writer explains that fathers, as fathers, discipline their sons. And if they were left without discipline, then they are outside of the family. They are illegitimate children rather than true sons. What are you facing today that's turning up the heat in your life? Are you viewing it as God stirring in your life, stirring to bring about a stickiness to stick with Him? Stir to stick. How about today taking time out and thinking through what is happening in you, inside of you, and to you? It takes so little time to do that. You get so busy with stuff. Soos hulle sê in Afrikaans, is raak besig met die dinge van die Here en nie met die Here van die dinge nie. And to become consumed with Him because of what is transpiring in your life. The son had to leave his father in order to suffer for the purpose of learning to stick with the Father and stick to the Father. If you've not had an experience like this, you will. You'll get ripped away from the familiar that you need to get away from because it's anesthetizing your soul. And it will put a tiger in your tank. We'll give you some guts, some chutzpah to go with God and to stick with Him. I, as a young man, had to learn the intensity of getting ripped away from the familiar, ripped away from parental care, from parental concern, in order to learn what walking with God looks like, so that I could make independent decisions for myself. And you only learn that once you get ripped away from the comfort zone. Once the bird is thrust outside of the nest, that's when that little birdie learns to fly. What a wonderful thing to fly. But it will cost you your very life in order to take a breath as you're dropping at free fall through the air. What is called a trust fall. Where you fall backwards and somebody catches you, but it feels like nobody's there and you have to fall backwards. You're stirred to stick. You can experience some stirring today. If not today, sometime soon. Am I a prophet of doom? No, I'm a realist. Because you won't get to grow deep with the Savior until you walk through deeply what alienation and what being a stranger feels like. Because suffering is a sign and a substantiation of sonship. That's how your belongingness is affirmed. In Africa, we have a quotation which says, I belong, therefore I exist. Well, I suffer, therefore I exist. How about changing it to that one? I trust that you would have a good day as you walk with the Lord, as you experience Him, as you learn to trust Him, and have a good day. Goodbye for now.